الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أصحاب السعادة، ضيوفنا الأعزاء من مختلف دول العالم، قيادات شرطية نفخر بها في الملتقى الدولي 12 لأفضل التطبيقات الشرطية، والذي جمع نخبة من المتحدثين والخبراء في مجال الذكاء الاصطناعي واستشراف مستقبل الأمن في الدول العالم وتبادل المعارف المثرية. جمعتنا هذه الأيام الرغبة في التعلم والعمل بجد وإخلاص وتحقيق هدف مشترك واحد، وهو تحقيق الأمن والقضاء على الجريمة.
الحضور الكريم، هنا في رحاب ملتقى أفضل التطبيقات الشرطية تلتقي فيه القيادات الأمنية المتخصصة وتعرض فيه تطبيقات المتميزة والتي تسهم في زيادة المهارات وصقل الخبرات المختلفة لمنتسبي الشرطة، لا سيما إذا كانت هذه التطبيقات ناتجة عن ممارسات أمنية لأجهزة شرطية هي بلا شك من أفضل الأجهزة الشرطية الفاعلة على مستوى العالم. الحضور الكريم، الآن وصلنا إلى المحور السادس من محاور الملتقى بعنوان الذكاء الاصطناعي وإدارة المرور، وسوف يدير هذا المحور رئيس الجلسة مهندس خبير الملازم أحمد عباس معروف من الإدارة العامة للمرور.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to start our panel discussion by inviting Lieutenant Expert Engineer Ahmed Marouf. The panel discussion will be under the title AI and Traffic Management. Please welcome him.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أيها السيدات والسادة الحضور، أسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. يسعدني أن أرحب بكم في اليوم المروري للملتقى الدولي 12 لأفضل التطبيقات الشرطية، وسنتناقش عدة مواضيع مختلفة عن التطبيقات وأفضل الممارسات في الجانب المروري، ويشاركنا متحدثين من دول مختلفة حول العالم مثل إيطاليا وألمانيا والمملكة المتحدة. وبداية أرحب بالضيوف العقيد باولو تشيسترا من إيطاليا. Welcome, Colonel. You're welcome there. والدكتورة نيكول سكالا من إيطاليا. والبروفيسور ديتمار أوتي من ألمانيا. Hi Professor. Thank you. والسيد ستيوارت من المملكة المتحدة. Welcome. Welcome, Mr. Stewart. والدكتورة جو بارنز من المملكة المتحدة. Hi, thank you. You're welcome there. وسنبدأ الجلسة الحوارية لهذا اليوم، وستبدأها الدكتورة نيكول سكالا من إيطاليا، متخصصة في علم النفس للعاملين في مجال الطوارئ والشرطة، ومستشارة في تيسبول شبكة الطرق الأوروبية، وستتحدث عن مركبات ذاتية القيادة وهل نثق بها؟ ستجيب على هذا التساؤل في الحوار التالي. شكرا. Welcome, Dr. Nicole.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good day. Today is the Happiness Day, the International Happiness Day. And before start, I want to share with you my happiness and I hope that you have a good Happiness Day. Before starting, I want to say thank you to Dubai Police to this opportunity to be here in this interesting symposium, and I want to say thank you to invite me in the symposium. Let's start with the presentation. Okay, well, my presentation is about driverless cars and the trust that people have in this vehicle, as well as the idea about the possible use of driverless and autonomous cars for police activity. Before starting, let me introduce myself. I'm Nicole Scala, and I'm a traffic and emergency psychologist. No more. My presentation is divided in a short introduction, the aim of research, literature review of most important research in this field, our research with its methodology, finding, result, evaluation, and feature development in this field. The study starting from the consideration that today technology has a very important role for road safety. It is working hard to reduce road accidents. We know that road accidents have become one of the leading death causes, especially for youth. Driverless cars are a decisive factor in reducing road accidents in the future. But in this scenario, what do people think about new technologies? Are people ready to buy a driverless car? Safety, confidence, privacy, reliability, and responsibility are the most important factors that are considered before buying or driving this type of car. The same considerations are taken into account for the adoption of a driverless car by the police. Okay. Today, driverless cars are becoming part of our technological present, and all of us are sure that in the future, these vehicles will be a normal part of circulating models on our roads. This present research is focused on three main questions. The first question is, do people trust driverless cars? It is possible to search and find the answer on the present psychological literature joined with technology. The second question is about the trust of police officers in driverless cars used for police activity. This point is the core of present research, done under request of TISPOL, European Network of Traffic Police Forces. For the near future, we have the third question. If police forces adopt driverless cars for police activities, will people trust them? So, do people trust driverless cars for police enforcement? Let's start with the first question. Do people trust driverless cars? What does the psychological literature say on this? There are several studies focused on this topic that explored people's feelings regarding driverless vehicles, especially concerning people, age, gender, education, and nominally on the safety perception. In general, young people are more confident with the driverless cars. No significant difference between gender or education. Other studies are focused on the differences on perception about driverless cars between drivers and pedestrians. This is an important concern, and it can change if I think as a driver or if I think as a pedestrian. Everyone would like to have a driverless car that drives in the traffic while we write a WhatsApp message, make a phone call, or look at a photo on Facebook, or when I'm tired. But would we trust a driverless car if we are a pedestrian? Are there differences? Yes, of course, but no more differences about this field. Other scholars study the perception of safety in the use of driverless cars into closest tasks, for example, university areas or airport. In this area, people seem confident, no problem in close environment, and pre-established routes. No, actually, some underground trains are autonomous, and people are confident to take them. Some other research has evaluated the ethical aspects of driverless cars use, especially related to collision risk and the possible fatal consequences of injuries. Do people trust driverless cars? To answer this question, we can use evidence from review studies which outline there are different studies focusing on the perception of safety related to driverless cars and related to performance, expectancy, the trust in technology, the reliability, and the security, and on privacy defense matter. So, do people trust driverless cars? According to the people evaluation, driverless cars are currently perceived in a general positive light and are considered as a low-risk vehicles. But there remain several thoughts about some specific items, for example, privacy and security. Some people think that their car not drive better than them. This is the general opinion about the use of driverless cars. And if the autonomous cars were used by the police, what will police officers think? This is a recurrent mind question. Do police officers trust driverless cars for police activities? To answer this question, we performed our research, done under request of TISPOL, the European Network of Traffic Police Forces. The first step was to adopt and submit a specific survey to 1,000 police officers around Europe. The target are police officers, senior and young officers. Used methodology is a survey. It surveys is opinion concerning driverless cars for police. Research activity is conducted over 2 years. The interviewed police officers belong to 21 European Union member states, including the United Kingdom, all members of TISPOL, European Network of Traffic Police Forces. Here there is a sample of a used survey. What are our research findings? We can start from the sample that is composed of approx 2/3 male, and there is a significant percentage of police officers with a graduate degree. The study at the moment is incomplete and ongoing. We are extending the sample to other police officers in Europe. Now we move to examine the result of research, analyze several outcomes. First question, the first question is, had you ever heard of autonomous and or self-driving vehicles? As you can see, more than 90% of our sample had heard of a driverless car. On the general opinion about autonomous vehicle, more than 36% is positive. 1/3 of the sample is neutral, and the 22% is negative. The absolute number of interviewed police officers have never used a driverless car, and especially for police activity. Even if a police officer never used driverless cars for police activity and also for private reasons, they are confident in use of driverless cars for police service, and they believe that it will be useful. Question 6. There are several different levels of autonomous and self-driving vehicle technologies. Which one do you prefer become part of the police fleet? We investigate about 5 levels of automation that they were present at the moment of the creation of survey. The level was, and I think that are at the moment, level 0, no automation, to level 5, full automation, driverless car. Approximately 50% of police officers believe that best autonomous vehicles to be used for police activity should be vehicles with a level 2 and level 3 of automation. But they prefer to continue to have the control of the vehicle in particular operational circumstances. One specific question in the survey is about the not close future. If and when police forces will use level 5 automation, driverless vehicles. In this evidence, interviewed police officer believes that this category of vehicles should be used for automatic number plate recognition, 64%, surveillance, 45%, only 7% for possible anti-road use. In this scenario, there are several concerns about the possible use of driverless vehicles. Most sensitive, 59%, is about safety consequence of equipment failure or system failure, as well as 51%. The possibility that autonomous vehicle getting confused by an unexpected situation. Important concern, 42%, are also about system security. Police officer believes that no big problems will come from the difficulty to learning to use the self-driving vehicles, only 7%, and from possible lack of performance in poor weather. Coming to specific evaluation, we can underline that police officers, as well as civilian people, have a general trust in driverless car use for police activity, confirming studies already present in literature for civil population. Nonetheless, today, there continue to be several concerns, nominally on safety and security, and the possible interaction with no self-driving road user, as well as unexpected situation. Based on the result of research, we can underline that European police who are interviewed seems to be inclined to use vehicle with autonomization level 2 and level 3. However, they seem to be not completely convinced of a total autonomous on self-driving vehicles. Researched police officers seems to prefer to maintain human presence in the police activity. They feel comfortable with the help that this kind of cars can give in the following field of police activity: EMPR, automatic number plate recognition, surveillance, patrolling, traffic accident management, intelligence. In conclusion, we have to come back to our third question. Do people trust driverless cars for police enforcement? Probably. At the moment, there are no answers, but a lot of ideas for the future. Our study continues. We are extending our survey to the civilian population. What is the future? We continue the research. We study the possible interaction with other research. We disseminate the research to civilian and other police officers. We explore specific fields of possible use of autonomous and or self-driving vehicle for police activity, and we hope to develop the extravaganza as a best practice for better results in future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Nicole, for your speech. والآن سيبدأ العقيد باولو تشيسترا من الوزارة الداخلية الإيطالية ورئيس السابق لمنظمة تيسبول شبكة شرطة الطرق الأوروبية، وسيتحدث عن دور البرامج التوعوية لمستخدمي الطريق وبرامج التعليم لتقليل وفيات الطرق.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And I know now that today is the International Day of Happiness. I don't know how it's possible for me to be happy at 8:30 in the morning. I like to wake up a little bit later and start our speech today This is too much early, but we must be happy today for this day. Before to start with my presentation, I want to say a special thanks to the Dubai Police Forces for the invitation to this amazing symposium, and also special thanks to the organizers of the symposium, and one my personal thanks to the language assistants, to the translators, because they did and continue to do a very, very hard job. After a presentation from scientists, and also the panel today is a full panel of scientists, included our colleague, police officer. She's an expert engineer. He's a scientist also. I am simple traffic police officers. My uniform is the Italian traffic police uniform, and my job is as a first executive police officer in my country, and I'm still the president of TISPOL, that is the European Network of Traffic Police Forces. I think I can finish my mandate at the end of next month, I hope, because now I have 4 years that I am in charge of the TISPOL presidency. And also, I don't know why, in my country I am an expert and representative to the whole committee in front of the European Union in charge to manage the road safety. When we speak together within the platea of traffic police officers, I prefer to say it's a road policing, not a traffic matter, but this road policing that is more important in my vision of the only traffic. The presentation today is coming back to the human factor. The aim of this symposium is the use of artificial intelligence, but to use artificial intelligence, we must continue to take care to the human factor. And one of the most important human factor in road safety is the behavior of road users. And one question ever we did in any kind of meetings, in any kind of conference we held within Europe is important or not the education of road users. And the education of road users has or not one specific role in road safety and nominally in decreasing of fatalities. I performed one specific study. I apologize for giving me all the scientists. I tried to give one scientific base to this study using only the current data we have in Europe, looking to our official database. And I try to give to this study the illustration as a normal scientific university study. One point is important to underline for all the traffic police officers. Main task for the United Nations organization, in my case for the European Commission, is to halve the number of road fatalities within the end of the 2020. Road fatalities are the most important cause of death for young people. As worldwide, there are 1.2 million killed persons on the road every year. This is a shame. This is a number we must decrease as soon as possible. And all around the world, there is the task to obtain this result within the 2020, and now I think we postpone this result within 2030 and the 2050. 2050 is the date we use now at the European level. The European Union also oblige member states. Now we are 28. I think we come to be 27 plus 1 in the near future, starting from the beginning of the next month. The European Union imposed to all the member states to adopt national road safety action plan, to adopt specific plan to obtain, describe the results we want to have and to do for obtaining the halving of traffic fatalities number. In my study, I try to underline the answer to the question as the road users education plans, programs has effective role in decreasing the number of fatalities. And like in the real researches, there are also three sub-questions under this big question. Why is important to have programs of education for road users, how those programs must be managed, and also inside the national plans that is mandatory to put into several strategic objectives, which can be the role of the road users education program. Taking a look very quickly to the existing literature, the most recent literature says, yeah, there is one role, a specific role for education programs, but till now, nowhere is a correct link between the decreasing of fatalities and the use of road users education programs. The literature underline that we can use these programs as performance indicators for member states, that we can use this program to evaluate the effectiveness of pre-training program, and also most recent literature underline that using this program is possible to change the behavior of young drivers and not to the elderly or to the most old drivers. But for the younger drivers, there is a very effective use of this program. And also, the most recent one underlined that the use and the adoption of road users programs, educations, can improve road safety. But nobody analyzed the situation from the point of view of the reduction of fatalities. That is the most important point in our activity. The methodology I used in performing this study is a simple quantitative compared system. I used all the existing data, official data, inside the European official database, specific using the European Commission database on road safety that's called ERSO. And I compared those data, the results of those data, for the period starting from the 2010 to the 2017. I compared the data with the indicators of road safety improvements and the decreasing of road fatalities in the member states. I follow a simple schema with simple question, starting from the hypothesis that is a positive hypothesis. That means that the starting hypothesis is that yes, road safety programs in education are useful to decrease the number of fatalities. We're told about national action plans. In each European member state is mandatory for the government, for the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of the Infrastructure to adopt these national road safety action plans. All the member states already adopted, 27 have pluriannual plans. One state, nominally the France, has an annual plan, and every year change the plan basing on the results of the previous year. It's a most important point is what are the topics, what are the objectives to put into the programs. The European Commission gave freedom to the member states to decide which kind of priorities put into the plans. But all the priorities can cover seven pillars for the road safety. You can see from the slides that 6 of those pillars are very, very connected with the technology, connected also with the possible use of the intelligence, artificial intelligence. But the first one, is not a case that is the first one, is continued to be related to the human factor. The first pillar of any kind of road safety national action plan is focused on training and education. Similar words, but very, very different. And we focus our activity on the education, on the role of the education. You can see in a sample on this slide that all the member states in the European Union put the enforcement, the third E, because road safety point of view is focused on the three E: enforcement, engineering, and because of the engineering, there is this amazing symposium, and education. Education, engineering, and enforcement are the three pillars of our activity on the road and also a strategical level. 100% of national plans cover the enforcement, but only the 39% cover the education. That is important to understand the big way we must continue to do to obtain best results. If we take a look to the performers in European Union and also in European countries, you can see a lot of colors. I prefer to see only one color, only the green, the dark green, but we have a lot of red, we have a lot of yellow countries. That means that in this moment, the target to obtain the half of fatalities within 2020 is out of scope. It's not possible at the moment, and is not possible to obtain at all within the 2020. The average of reduction of fatalities in the European Union is the 20%, and it was expected the 38% on 2017 to obtain the less 50% within the 2020. Best performers, in this case we can use best and worst because there is a red, green color. I apologize for my country that in this moment is in the red colors. You can see that compared to 27 plus 1, 28 states, we have only 16, that are above the European average of the 20%. And the only two countries that are on track to obtain the requested result of reduction of 50% of fatalities within the 2020 are Greece and Estonia. Only two member states within 2028. If we take a look at the contents of the national plans of the 16 above average member states, we can notice that the 50%, in this case the percentage increased so much, the 50% compared in the previous 39% of member states adopted road users education plans. And also it's very important to try to cover all the strategic objectives, all the 7 strategic objectives in the plans, and 50% of these 16 member states above the average covered all the 7 strategic objectives. What does it mean? That means that it's very important to adopt all the strategic objectives, and it's very important to obtain reduction of fatalities, to have a very strong education program for drivers. But both of them results cannot obtain result alone. Inside the national road plans, it's important to put education, but education programs alone are not sufficient and not enough to obtain reduction of fatalities. To obtain this result, we must have a shared activity, putting the human factor at the same level of the use of technology, of the possibility to improve the enforcement using the technology. It's important to cover all the 7 pillars that the European Commission indicated to the member state to have. But it's also important to underline that all the member states who doesn't put road users education programs into the national plans cannot obtain best result. The best resulters, Greece and Estonia, have in their national plans all the 7 indicated pillars and have also educational programs. That is important to answer to our question, and the answer is one green light. Yes, it's important to have road users education programs to decrease the number of fatalities. It's important because data demonstrated that without this program it's not possible to reduce the fatalities number. Which kind of programs is better to adopt? This is a very interesting question, and starting from the findings of literature and starting from the findings of the research, it's better to have targeted, specific targeted programs targeted to young people, to vulnerable users, to first users of the road. Remember one thing, users of the road not means only drivers. We become road users the first moment we start to walk. We start to walk alone on the road and we become road users. This is very important because that means that we can start our activity of education at the basic level, at the first grade of school, at the elementary school. And also it's very important to put into the national strategy for road safety the education programs for drivers. Running to the conclusion of my short presentation, I think I am within time. Some recommendation that continue to recommend to all the nation, all the people who have the possibility to put pressure to the governments in adoption of road safety plan, to put the education of road users as topic into the plan, to develop education program starting from the idea that the road users is not only the driver, focus those program on specific users, vulnerable users. For example, it's important also to address this program to professional drivers, and it's important not only the formation into the education, but also the information. It's very similar, the terms, but the contents are more and more different. It's important to have an education campaign, information within the education, and also the formation. And we have to train. Formation is, we can use also the term train. We have to train the trainers, not only to train the trainees. It's one very important point of view, because specifically in our activity, never forget that we are police officers and not teachers, and to teach, to educate people, we must before be educated to do this kind of activity. And last but not least, use our human intelligence with the effort also of the artificial intelligence to create ideas, to create new education programs, and following the idea of this symposium, start to use also the extravaganza in created road user education programs. This is my point of view as executive police officer in my country. This is my point of view as president of the European Network of Road Traffic Police Forces. And I try to support this idea with facts, with numbers, with studies. And at the records of this symposium, I give the study I performed and I just presented. Thank you so much again for the invitation here, and apologize in advance because it's not possible for me to receive question from you, because at 9 o'clock I must leave the room to attend the think tank activity with our colleagues of the Dubai Police. Thank you again, and have a nice and beautiful day of happiness today. Thank you very much.
Thank you كولونيل باولو. طبعا الحوار كان جدا ملهم ومبني على دراسات وابحاث الذي قام به العقيد باولو من ايطاليا. والان مع متحدثه اخرى من جامعه لفبرا في بريطانيا، الدكتوره جو بارنز. ويلكم دكتور جو. هاي.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'll find a slide. Okay. I've been asked to talk to you about injury scaling today, and injury scaling is just a way of making sense of road traffic injuries on a big scale. It's a way of assigning codes to injuries, so you can analyse your data, you can set road safety targets, you can decide injury pattern trends and all sorts of things. So injury scaling is a useful tool to try and adopt. Okay, so today I want to give you an overview of the abbreviated injury scale, which is the internationally recognised coding manual. I'll give you an overview of that, just show you some simple codes and what it does. And also, how can it be used effectively? What's the benefit of using AIS on road traffic collision injuries? What can you do with it? So firstly, let's define an injury. An injury is a lesion resulting from a transfer of energy. And what do we mean by a lesion? So, for example, if you fell over and grazed your hand, that is an abrasion. It's a very minor injury. So injuries range from small abrasions to catastrophic head injuries. And injury scaling is a way to try and make sense of those injuries so you can actually determine and look at patterns and trends and things like that. Most road traffic collision injuries are from blunt trauma, although you can get penetrating injuries, burn injuries, and other types of injuries. So AIS, abbreviated injury scale, has been around for a very long time. It started life back in the 1960s, where it was used for airplane crashes, where people were coded either as being fatal, so they died during the plane crash, or they survived. So it's very basic. And since then, there's been lots of iterations of the coding manual, going from a few codes to nowadays there's about over 2,000 injuries in the latest edition of the coding manual. So it's gone from a few hundred up to 1,000 and then over to 2,000 injuries. The development of the AIS has been governed by the Association for the Advancement of Automotive Medicine in the USA. I don't know if people have heard it. It's called the AAAM, that's its abbreviation. And what it did, it got together lots of different people, physicians, nurses, engineers, biomechanics, experts, and developed the codes based on biomechanical knowledge and also based on medical advances in technology, for example. So over the time, new medical techniques have come into play, so people actually survive their injuries much better than they used to. People might have died of certain injuries, but nowadays they will survive them. The outcomes might not be great, but they're actually survivable, so the severities have changed. And it can be useful, the ones in pink are probably more useful for police forces. It enables you to look at your crash investigations and get definite severities from your occupants that were injured, so you can define definite severities for those occupants. Unlike perhaps in the UK, where the police go to the crash scene and decide, oh, that one looks a bit like a slight injury, that's a bit of a, I think that one's a serious injury. But sometimes internal injuries can't be seen at the roadside, so this is a way of actually having a definite injury description and a severity to assign to that casualty. It can be used for assigning societal costs based on injuries that happen, and also for policy decisions and legislation. Okay, it ranks injuries by relative importance to the whole body. So what you can do, you can assign a code so you know exactly where it is in the body. The dictionary contains various chapters. There's one for the head, face, neck, spine, chest, etc. So within each of those chapters, there's loads of codes for that body region and the severity associated with that type of injury in that type of body region. I do have one with me, so if anybody wants to see it at coffee time, please feel free, and you can have a look at what I'm talking about. It's good for standardising terminology. It's good for standardising injury. It's comparable to the rest of the world where people use AIS. So, you know, if you code your road traffic collisions, your injuries in those, you'll be able to compare your information, your data with other countries in the world. You can use it to define multiple injury causes and all sorts of things. So it's like a threat to life scale. So if you have a minor injury, chances are you're less likely to die compared to having a more serious injury. So essentially what it is, it's when we talk about AIS and we talk about AIS severity, this is what we're talking about. It's an ordinal scale. I was hoping this would work. Doesn't work very well, the pointer. So it's on an ordinal scale 1 to 6. And it's just a way of describing the severity. So 1 just means it's a minor injury, 2 means it's a moderate injury, 3 is a serious injury, and so on. And 6 is the maximal injury that you can have. Currently, it's described or defined as being untreatable. So, for example, some really severe injuries, a high neck fracture that's severed the spinal cord. Usually you don't survive from that, so, and the treatment, you can't really treat high spinal cord lacerations. So currently 6 is the maximum severity. And as I say, it's ordinal scale, it's just a descriptor, so if you have an AIS of 2, which is a moderate injury, it doesn't mean it's twice as bad as having a minor injury, it is just a description. So who can use it? Well, anybody can use it. It does help if you've got a bit of basic biology or basic anatomy information. Makes it easier, but however, there is Google, there are medical dictionaries, so you can actually identify where injuries are. The only thing is that you do have to be trained to use it, only because there's lots of rules and guidelines. So if you want to compare your data with the rest of the world, you need to all be following the same rules and guidelines to use it. So how does it work? As I said before, it just assigns a code to a particular injury in a particular body region. Here is just an example. So that's a femur fracture, which is your thigh bone, and it's a serious injury. So the severity is an AIS-3, it's a serious injury, and it's always a serious injury. If you die from consequences or complications of a femur fracture, for example, a fat embolism, just because you die, your severity doesn't go up. The injury is just described as that fractured femur, an AIS-3 on that day, and if you die, it's still an AIS-3 injury. This is an example code. So these are, if you imagine there's pages and pages of this kind of information in the dictionary. So on the left-hand side, you have a unique numeric identifier. And on the right-hand side, you have written information about what the injury is. So the top line says a humerus shaft fracture, which is your upper arm. And the unique numerical identifier for that is 751221. So it's like a dictionary. So if you wanted to look up how to spell a word, you go to a dictionary to have its definition. The AIS manual is exactly that. So there's pages of codes that are linked to an actual injury definition. So if you wanted to analyse arm injuries, for example, humerus shaft fractures, they were a problem in road traffic collisions. These numeric codes allow you to do that. So you would just in your database select all the codes beginning with 751, which is a humerus shaft fracture. It's just a way of being able to contain and analyse your data. The number on the right-hand side, where the red arrow is the actual AIS severity. So when we talk about the AIS severity, it's that last digit there. So you can see a humerus shaft fracture is an AIS-2 injury, which is a moderate injury. However, if you have an open fracture, it becomes more complicated, and it goes up to a serious injury because of the risk of infection that goes with it. So this is all what AIS is about. It's just a code linked to a descriptor, and there's always a severity on the right-hand side after the full stop. Okay, so ideally, when you code injuries, you'll have lots of medical notes or post-mortem notes to actually help you code them, and you'll get accurate codes as well. But if someone's got 20 injuries, what can you do? It gets complicated. Yes, you've got all the injury information, but how do we describe that person with lots of injuries? So there's two ways. You can use the Maximum Abbreviated Injury Scale, or MAIS. It's used commonly. You might hear that term or read that term if you look at research papers. Or you can use the Injury Severity Scale, another terminology that you might see in research papers. So this is just an example of MAIS, that maximum AIS score. So if somebody had these injuries, we've got a head, chest, abdomen, and extremity injury, all we do to define that person is take the highest severity injury that they have. And in this case, somebody's got a 5 in the chest. So we would describe that person, that casualty, as a MAIS 5 casualty. So they are a critically injured casualty. And that's what you do. You just pick the highest severity injury for that person, and you define them as a MAIS 3 for a serious injury and MAIS 5 for a critical injured person. So it's quite straightforward. How can we use MAIS? As I say, it's used a lot in research. Recently in Europe, we've defined what a serious injury is for road traffic collisions, and it's a MAIS 3+. And the thing about that is standardized the description for a serious injury in a road traffic collision. So it's a way of standardizing. It also helps you evaluate injury trends over time. And it will actually help be able to set road safety targets and measure those too. ISS is slightly different. I won't go into the calculation, but it involves a different kind of calculation. It's on a scale of 1 to 75, and anybody that has 16 as a score is considered a major trauma in medical terms. So hospitals will use 16 and above as to define somebody with a major trauma. And what it does, it just uses 3 different injuries from 3 different body regions. Again, I can talk to you about that later, but it's just enough to say that ISS is used, and you might see that in research papers. The thing about it as well is if you don't have decent medical information or records or anything, there is an allowance in the dictionary to actually allow you to code the frequency of certain injuries. For example, if you had a wrist injury, or you had a chest injury or a head injury, but you don't know any more descriptions, you don't actually know the information, you can assign a 9, and a 9 just means unknown, not enough information. And that will allow you to just count frequencies of those kind of injuries in people in road traffic collisions. It doesn't allow you to have a severity, so you wouldn't describe somebody with a MAIS 9 either. That wouldn't make sense because it's not a severity, it's just an unknown number. So there is this allowance if you don't have great information to record frequencies of injury. So if you do have a lovely database of road traffic injuries all coded to AIS, how can it be used? The benefits of it are that you have a consistent approach to coding injuries. It's a way to actually determine actual severity. As I said before, your data will be comparable to the rest of the world. So when you talk about your minor injuries or you're talking about your serious injuries that you might have in Dubai, you know that if people are using this AIS in other countries like UK, America, Australia, Europe, you know that your injuries, and you can compare your injuries sustained in road traffic collisions with people with the other countries. You can use it for setting road safety targets. I'm doing a study where we're looking at identifying culpable drivers, those people that are actually causing the MAIS 3+ on our roads. You can use it to cost injuries, monitor injury trends over time, and monitor injury patterns too. So I'll give you some examples. So I said before, Europe's using MAIS 3 Plus as the definition for serious injury, and we've also got a target to reduce our serious injury on the road by 50% by 2030. And what we can do, because we've got this definition, this standard definition, we know that it's measurable. So we know by 2030 we can see if our serious injuries on our road using that MAIS 3 Plus measure have gone down or not. And that's just one way that we can use that. And secondly, this is a study we're doing. We're looking at trying to identify culpable drivers to actually try and get targeted road safety interventions, driver behaviour change at those drivers that are causing the serious injuries on our road. So what we're doing is using our national police data, and we're linking it to trauma information and 3 Plus to identify our serious injuries. And this is what we've done so far. So we've taken our Stats 19 data, the national police data set, for 5 years worth of data for one particular geographical area in the UK, and we've linked it to the same geographical area trauma registry to try and identify people that have got a MAIS 3 Plus injury from those road traffic collisions. And we've linked it using age, gender, the date of the incident, and first line of the postcode. And what we've found and what we've done is we linked our police data with the trauma data, identified those people with a serious injury, gone back to our police database and identified all the vehicles that were involved in the actual collision. So what we have in the 279 linked records, we have 251 collisions, but we have 434 drivers that were involved in all those collisions. So our next step in this study on which we're doing now, is assigning culpability. So not culpability in the sense of the law, but culpability in the sense of human factors, or if weather had an impact on the crash itself. Did the drivers make the wrong decision? So our culpability scoring is looking at other things beyond whether they went through a red light, for example. And then we're going to use that information. Once we've got our culpable drivers, we're going to geodemographically profile them to see what areas they live in the UK, whether there's a pattern with certain areas of the population that are causing these MAIS 3 Plus injuries on our road, and try and identify where they are and get targeted road safety interventions to those drivers. So for example, if they're young drivers, how can we reach young drivers? Or if they're the middle-aged drivers, how can we get to them effectively and change their driving behaviour? So that's one way we're using AIS and MAIS 3 Plus. And then lastly, monitoring injury patterns. This is just a paper from 2012 where we looked at abdominal injury and frontal crashes. So we have a few crash databases in the UK. One is called the Cooperative Crash Injury Study, which did finish a while ago. So we had 12 years of data, and we were looking at frontal impact crashes and looking at belted occupants in frontal crashes. So we had over 4,000 belted occupants. And what we found in terms of the results, that rear seat passengers, belted rear seat passengers, had higher AIS2 and AIS3 plus injuries to their abdomen compared to the driver and the front seat passenger. So the implications of finding information out like that is, okay, so what's going on in the vehicle? Is it the restraint system? Are rear seat passengers sitting out of position, for example? What is going on? And the implications from this study particularly was actually looking at the restraint development in the rear seat passengers, because it was slightly different to the driver and the front seat passengers, plus the driver and front seat passengers were often protected by the frontal airbags when they went off as well. So the outcomes for the rear seat passengers were slightly worse than the front seat. So you can use AIS if you've got that kind of information to look at your injury trends over time. It helps match the injuries, and when you're looking at your crash vehicles, for the biomechanics, the impacts and everything else, it's a good way of combining that information, and obviously you can use it for research and publishing as well. So that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joe, for your speech. طبعا دكتور جو من بريطانيا تحدثت عن النظام اللي هو نظام AIS لتصنيف شدة الإصابات التي يتعرض لها مستخدمي الطرق في الحوادث المرورية. والآن مع المتحدث الآخر البروفيسور ديتمار أوتي من معهد هانوفر للأدلة في ألمانيا. سيتحدث عن ميكانيكا الحيوية وتوثيق الحوادث لتحليل الأحداث الغامضة في مسرح الحادث المروري.
Yes, I hope it is clear. Yes, thank you very much for your invitation, and it is a pleasure to be here and to give a lecture about a special field in the forensic part, that is the biomechanics. Biomechanics means the tolerance of the human body inside accidents. And my task is to promote the idea of an interdisciplinary work of engineers, medical people, and those people who have the right to be an expert in this field. So we have different questions which are rising by the judge or by the prosecution or by the police, different who is dealing with the accident situation. So we could have the question, was the seatbelt used right, or was it not used? Was the helmet of a motorcycle rider used in looking to the injury distribution? And a very important question is coming mostly from the insurance side. If there is a severe injury and the driver, the occupant, or the motorized two-wheeler did not wear a helmet, then the question is how injury severe would be the accident if a helmet would used. And we have always the question, is the driving speed and the impact speed, how much it is, but if it is driven above, very above, about the speed limit, then the judge is asking what kind of injury severity would be happened if the speed limit was not overturned. So we have a special methodology in which we go forward. The normal standard is to reconstruct the traces on the road, the vehicles, and to look to the injuries. But the technician and the engineers is analyzing only the speed. And if we need a special question to the injury, we need special people who are trained and analyzing the injuries. And the idea is to do all in the same accident field, to discuss the case in a round table, and the technician can analyze the accident severity, the injury causation, and the load determination, and the medical doctor can analyze the assessment of the injuries by kind, location, and the amount of the injuries, these circumstances. And we have sometimes special questions in which we need additional experts, mostly neurological, if the nerve is integrated, or we have ear, nose, throat experts to integrate if we have hearing problems like tinnitus. So this makes sense to integrate special experts, and I will follow some results which I go forward in giving you two examples which are mostly happened as a question to the expert that is on one side so-called whiplash injury. So if we see whiplash is coming from after an accident with health complaints, so that means you have a headache or you have painful mobility of your cervical spine. After the accident, you cannot move your head. And we are calling this as whiplash-associated disorders, WAD. Concerning the AAS lists, it is a very minor injury, but the pains could be very long-term. We have a medical grade of this, so we are divided such injuries into 4 grades. The minor grade is you have only headaches, you have only muscle strains, and without any integration of nerves, then it is mostly a lower grade of 1 and 2. And if you have integrated nerves or complicated cervical spine, things that it is a higher grade. We know from the accident situation that those injuries in the standard traffic are related to the accident severity of the car, which is determined by the delta V, so the speed absorption during the accident. And we know that the percentages of such painful long-term consequences are increasing with such things. But we could have such pains also in very low accidents. So, for example, after braking only, without any collision. And then drivers are reported about some pains after the accident. And we analyzed this situation by test measurements with probands. You see here the videos. That was a speed of 40 kilometers per hour, only emergency braking. And then you have also such movement of your whole body. But the question is, could that be following into the painful situation which you have? The insurance companies are normally saying, no, that can't, because they would not like to pay for this. And therefore, we analyzed this. We measured the load, and you see here the load distribution about the time. You see 2 peaks. One is going negative. That is the one who is working frontally. And the second one, which you see is higher, is the so-called rebound version, which is coming if you are going backwards. And you see the maximum level is 1.7 G, and the head acceleration is 2.5. So the difference between head and thorax is now exactly what you have seen before in the movies. So there is a characteristic movement of such things, and we can say there is in principle no risk in terms of whiplash injuries after such accidents, but under the medical point of view, it could happen. And what is the conclusion? What we have to do as the expert to answer this? First, we have to analyze the load which comes from the accident, mostly in delta V, in the speed absorption, and secondly, to integrate the medical sign, to look especially to the diagnosis which the patient has, and that should be done not in a separate request to the expert. That means first gives the order to the technician, second gives the order to the medical. No, you have to do it together, because only in the together interdisciplinary approach you are able to answer correctly this question. And you have to integrate all the medical or the experts which are working on that field. Another question very often arise are the injuries of an unbelted rear or occupant. Here in this example, it is a rear occupant, reducible with a seatbelt use. And to analyze this, first you have to analyze the accident. So I can show you here, it was a car driver following this route into the curve, and he impacted a tree. We had two front occupants, was seatbelted, and one rear occupant not seatbelted. And the question was lower injury severity in using the three-point belt in the rear because he did not use it. And here you see the deformation, very high deformation from the tree nearly until the front window. And the driver and co-driver, only minor injuries, and the passenger on the rear received a traumatic brain injury and hematothorax, so liver contusions, so many injuries in the thorax area. You see the deformation on the right, and we analyzed first the seatbelt use to answer the question, how was the seatbelt use in the situation? You can look to the belt. If you find marks on the belt, then you are sure this was used, and the analysis of the rear passenger gives the situation very clear. He was not used the seatbelt. Then we used the PC crash analysis to find the movement of the car against the tree. It was a speed of more than 100 kilometers per hour in the beginning, and then the impact speed to the tree was 85 kilometers per hour, and there was a second tree involved, and he impacted with 65. So we have one in the front and one in the rear. The impact, you see here the situation again. The red colored is the impact to the tree, and from this there was a rotation of the car, and the black one is the final position which you found later. The PC crash analysis brings the situation that the movement of the occupant was from the rear position here in the middle, and exactly he impacted with the thorax, the seat back of the front passenger, and then he moved straight forward between the driver's seat and the passenger seat, front to the dashboard, impacted with his head the dashboard, and the conclusion of the PC crash analysis was in this situation with seat belt, this would not be possible to impact with the head to the steering or to the dashboard in front, and also not possible to impact with the thorax to the back of the frontal seat. But that went to court. And in the court, they all say, yeah, that is PC crash simulation. The PC crash simulation has a high variation, but that could not be true. Your accident analysis must be modified. We are not sure that the result of injury reduction could occur in such heavy accident. What we have done further, we have made a crash test to find with dummies the same situation. You see here the pillar. It was an impact speed the same as from PC crash was given. And the delta V of the car was around 60 kilometers per hour. You see here with belt, the movement of the rear occupant can be really reduced. And the same was done without belt. And you see exactly the same situation, and now following the rear passenger, which is sitting on the right in the back, and the airbags employed, you see, and the rear passenger is going exactly to the front, exactly hit with the thorax, the seat, and with the head moved forward to the situation. So we can exactly demonstrate with such crash tests how it was possible to reduce the situation, and the existing long-term consequences are based on these severe head injuries, and the conclusion is if this occupant wear a helmet, wear a seatbelt, then he could avoid such severe situation. And I have shortly time to bring up another example, which is always coming now more often. Could the use of protective garment reduce the injury severity and result long-term consequences in a motorcycle accident? And we have done the same. First, accident reconstruction. Here, motorcyclists hit laterally to a car which was turned to the left. So the car is the red arrows and the blue is the motorcyclist. And the final position was found there. The final position are drawn in a 3D laser scan, and then we are able to identify the deformations of the car and find the collision constellations. On the second time, you have the injuries, traumatic brain injury, brain bleeding, fracture of the elbow, so of the lower arm, you see the radius, and you see heavy foot injury or foot injuries on the right leg. And you have long-term consequences, especially from the brain injuries and from the foot injuries. Making a PC crash simulation brings you further in the idea of what was happened in the trajectories of the movement of the body, and you can find inside your reconstruction that you had a high compression of the foot between the motorcycle, and you had exactly the head impact on the roof area of the car. The simulation confirmed this situation, and you can at the end correlate injuries and impact load together in finding your conclusion. But now the question starts, could the protective clauses, which are just existing in Europe, because we have a European standard for motorcycle clauses, we have different parts of protectors protecting the body. You see elbow, lower arm, the spine, and the thorax. With the standard which is existing is the CEN 1621, is testing such protectors, and we have a standard for the whole garment. And now the judge is also asking, in not using such garments, could these garments reduce the injury severity? Because then the causation is also given by the driver, because he has to do all the best to protect himself during the accident. And we made tests with such garments, so we found that the force, which is the standard 35 kilonewton, is impacting to the garment, and we see that at the end only 10 kilonewton is coming down to the body. So you have a reduction from such protectors, but not so much, because the thickness is not so big as it looks like, or it should be, and therefore you have not a good protection for everything. So you can say here in the impact speed of 40 kilometers per hour that the long-term consequences are based on the foot injuries. They can be reduced with special motorcycle boots, but the lower arm fractures would also was avoidable by the protectors, but your lower leg fracture is not reducible because the thickness of the material is not enough to protect such fractures of the lower leg. And finally, I have to say the benefit of biomechanics could be demonstrated with these small examples, but the field is much wider in doing this because the need is there to combine the technical engineering conclusions, which can be measured by G, and the force can be good correlated with the kind of injuries, AIS, if you have best educated experts. And to do this in an interdisciplinary way, with this I would say and close my lecture and saying thank you very much.
كل الشكر للبروفيسور ديتمار أوتي من ألمانيا، حيث أنه قدم أسلوب رائع في تحليل الحوادث الغامضة واستخدام برامج إعادة بناء الحادث في ألمانيا، واستعرض علينا التجربة الألمانية في تحليل الحوادث. So thank you, Professor. والآن إلى متحدث آخر من المملكة المتحدة، قائد فريق السلامة الاستراتيجية للطرق السريعة السيد ستيوارت لوفاد. Welcome.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dubai Police for inviting me here today. It's an honor to speak. I want to talk to you about a key initiative that we're taking forward in Highways England, which is aimed at work-related road safety. But I'll begin by just giving you a quick information about who Highways England is and why I'm here today. So we run the Strategic Road Network on behalf of the government, which is approximately 3% of the strategic road network, the major road network in England. We carry, as it says there, about 4 million customers a day. But rather than me just giving you some facts and figures, I thought we'd just run a corporate video that we've developed to explain to people who Highways England is and what we do.
At Highways England, we believe in a connected country. We believe that connecting people builds communities, that connecting families with places creates memories, that connecting workers with jobs creates opportunities, and that connecting businesses helps our nation thrive. Our network makes these connections happen, 4 million a day, and we make them happen safely, reliably, because we're the ones who never sleep, the ones who strive to improve our major roads and motorways, the ones who quietly design and plan, build and run, with pride, care, and experience, because our network is vital to the running of the country. We engineer the future to keep people moving today and moving better tomorrow. We've introduced Cockneys to Cornwall and Carlisle to the continent. 4,300 miles driven smarter and smoother. City to countryside, mountain to coast, wherever the people are. What connects them is England. What connects England is us.
Thank So in Highways England, we have 3 imperatives that we have to achieve in order to meet our license that we are given from the government to run the strategic road network. The first imperative, and the most important, is that of safety. Safety for our own staff, our own workforce, our own traffic officers, but also those people who are working on our behalf on the roads. And then we also have safety of our customers. And we've heard a lot over the last few days talking about the need to reduce fatalities. Well, this is absolutely crucial to us. But the second is customer service. We have to ensure that the people that we're doing this for on behalf of the government and the society, that we meet their needs and their demands to ensure that the network is running smoothly and efficiently. And the third imperative is that of delivery of the investment strategy that the government has placed upon us to continuously upgrade and improve the network and make it inherently more safer. So there you see, basically, we are the backbone, the spine of the country. And here you can see that we have, for safety, we have the primary KPI, KPI 1, is around a 40% reduction in the number of people who were killed and seriously on our network. And as you can see, over the last few years, we were doing quite well up to about 2009 when the recession hit. And since then, we've had a slight upturn. 2017, again, we've seen a bit of a blip. The thick blue line is the target that we have to achieve, the 40% reduction, which relates to what Paolo was saying in terms of meeting the targets through the action plans. But we are stalling. And you saw again, as you're coming from a very low base, it is increasingly difficult to drive down the numbers, particularly as we're seeing an increasing growth rate of the number of vehicles and customers who are using our network on a daily basis. So I lead on the development of the National Incident and Casualty Reduction Plan, which sets out our key target that we have to reduce, and that's from a baseline of 2005-7, which means that ultimately we have to not exceed 1,393 people who were killed and seriously on our network, which is a very high number, but given 4 million customers a day, it is still a very stretching target that we have to achieve. So this plan sets out the approach that we're going to do to target the road safety reduction that we have been set, but also it introduces, for the first time for Highways England, a safe system approach which will provide the framework for which we will deliver. The safe system is about us looking to continuously improve the network whilst ensuring that the UK vehicle fleet continuously improves, but also our customers are drive on our network in a much more compliant manner. So it introduces a delivery model which we are following. But the issue here, and one that started to raise concerns within Highways England, is as we were trying to achieve these, you can see here the number of fatalities, and these are across the whole of Great Britain, not just on the strategic road network. 1,793 people, as it says there, were killed in Great Britain in 2017, which are the latest national statistics that we have. We lost 231 people killed just on our roads. But the main concern is since 2009, as you can see there, we've had a plateauing out. We're constantly reporting between 220 and 240 people being killed in our network each year, and we are not driving this down. And so we started to look to be more innovative. What can we do to do this? Yes, we need to improve driver behavior and raise awareness with our customers of how to use the network. But also, there are other factors. And one of the things that came out from this is that whilst we have these horrendous casualties that we need to address, we've also got millions of accidents across Great Britain happening every year. But a third of those, the research and the studies have found, are people actually driving for work. And they're particularly hitting, killing and maiming vulnerable users, the cyclists, the pedestrians, motorcyclists. And so that started a range of thinking of what can we do to target those people who are actually driving for work. So when we looked at the analysis of Stats 19, the police collision data, and when we looked at other academic research, and a member of my team sits on the the national review of the police casualty data, Stats 19. One of the things that we found, and particularly when we did some, I was pleased to work with Dr. Jo Barnes and her husband on a fatal research study where we looked at the in-depth collision forensic investigation. And whether we looked at the Stats 19 or whether we even looked at where there's been a detailed forensic analysis of death, only 1 in 5 was the journey purpose being recorded. So part of the National Review, one of the things that we're looking to do is make journey purpose one of the mandatory fields that need to be recorded by the police at the scene. But when you look at these figures, you can see that actually the driver is actually killing 6 times as many people as they are themselves. So they're either killing the friend, the colleague in the vehicle with them, or other road users, as we say, especially vulnerable users. And also they're being killed and seriously injured on their way to and from work. So this led us to think that there's actually more that we need to be doing here to address people who are using our network, which is what it's predominantly designed for, is the movement of freight and commerce around the country. There's more needs to be done. So we started to look at this. Million company car drivers in the UK, 4 million vans, 40 million people who are using their own vehicle, but for work purposes, as well as all the big, heavy commercial vehicles going up to 44 tons that are coming into the country every day or just being from our own domestic fleet. So we started to look, well, do we need more legislation? Do we need more rules, more laws to require this? But actually, when we looked at it, there are already 8 acts of Parliament which require how people and businesses need to operate in this area. So we decided we don't need any more laws. There is enough laws there for the enforcement agencies in the United Kingdom and Great Britain to take action. The issue is that at the moment they're not doing because the police and the standard agencies have got bigger priorities. And so we felt that the strength of Highways England would be to start to raise awareness of this issue so that we can ask for more focus on this actual activity. So you saw the legislation. Put simply, a company must not do anything that puts its drivers at risk. That's the law. The companies must have policies in place, the activities that they require. Now, at a previous conference, I was referring to a piece of research that's been done by Dr. Nicola Christie and Dr. Heather Ward from University College London, which is looking at the gig economy. And that research, again, got us thinking, is that actually business, as society demands ever faster deliveries, same day, next day deliveries, the gig economy is expanding rapidly. We're seeing more and more vans on the network. This is leading us to realize that businesses are actually compelling their employees to break the law, to violate and cause harm and certainly increase risk to society. So we started to think, well, what could we do? Again, the research is suggesting that nearly all fleet vehicles are expected to have a collision. Most of those will be minor bumps and scrapes, often in car parks, reversing in and out, and not very serious. But most company cars also will be involved in an accident within the next 12 months, usually minor damage-only type incidents. So we started to look at the cost to business of doing this. And you can see here, there are a lot of hidden costs. It's not just the fact that the car has been damaged. The fact is it has to be replaced. So you'll have to have higher costs. Your insurance premiums will go up. So we thought that this was an angle that we could take into business as we're looking at trying to bring about a behavioural change here in the way that people are thinking how they operate this tool that they've been given, whether it's a car or a van or a lorry. And start to think about the fact is, one of the ways that we can engage with business is to start thinking about the fact is that these crashes, not only are they harming a lot of people, they're actually costing the companies and business a heck of a lot of money. But the biggest cost, of course, which is very often not taken into consideration when they look at the costs of an accident within the business, is the fact that one of their best employees may be lost permanently or may be lost on sick leave. And so you can see here other research that's being done across the EU suggests that the hidden cost could be up to 56 times what businesses expect this to be. So all this led us to start thinking about, well, what can we do? And so I want to talk to you particularly today about this initiative that we've launched in Great Britain, which is called Driving for Better Business. Driving for Better Business has been running for 11 years in Britain, which was aimed about a campaign aimed about raising awareness with business about the scale of this problem. But a year ago, Highways England took over the lead and put some significant funding in to start to drive this program forward. So the aim of it is about reducing costs, as it says there, but it's about reducing the risk to businesses and reducing the risk to society. But more importantly, it's about trying to improve compliance. If businesses are not complying with the laws that are already set, there is no point in us asking for more and more legislation, more laws. And so we started to think that there are different ways that we can do this. So we've set out the traditional aims, the ambition and the mission. But basically what we want to do is we want to raise the level of awareness of work-related driving in the United Kingdom, and particularly for those people who are working on our behalf in England, to raise it to the same standard as health and safety. Everybody understands about health and safety. There's no cables across the floor here, and when you drive around, you see on the sites, not just in England, but you see them here in Dubai, about safety at the site. Very often you'll see signs saying, safety starts here. Well, actually it doesn't. Safety starts on the way to the site when you're bringing the concrete, when you're bringing the steel actually to that site. That vehicle is a tool just like they will use on a site. So our ambition is to bring about a radical change, and I firmly believe that this program can be one of the biggest game changers in road safety in a generation back in England. And the mission is to improve the levels of compliance. It's not about enforcement, it's not necessarily about giving more fines, it's not about seizing more vehicles, it's about raising the level of compliance so businesses understand what it is that's required of them. So very simply, it's about raising awareness. It's about working in partnership. It fits into the National Anti-Eruption Plan, as I say. It's about making journeys safer, reducing costs to employers. So why wouldn't the employer want to speak to us when we're saying to them that we can actually reduce many of the hidden costs that are faced upon them? So what we've done, we've used the funding that we were initially given to develop a whole range of tools and resources and advice and information that you would normally get in a campaign, and it's all free. There's risk assessments that businesses can go on there and look at the actual risk that their fleets are facing. And so we've developed all these tools which are available at drivingforbetterbusiness.com. If you have a look, you can see the kind of tools and the resources that we've created and will continue to create. We've also created some businesses that have gone through this process and can demonstrate the significant benefits of following this kind of approach that we're advocating. So as you can see here, Gateshead Council, the public sector body, it's a local authority council. They've seen their collisions down by 64% by the way that they are monitoring their fleet. Often some of these things can come with the introduction of things like telematics in the vehicles, the black box, the app, etc., etc. Clancy Dockery, who last year won our Chairman's Award for the improvements that they'd seen, you can see here, insurance claims down 15%, poor driving down 20%. Iron Mountain, one of the big suppliers that work very much for the public service in England, their incidents were down 87% over 9 years. So we had some very good evidence to suggest that by monitoring your fleet and requiring your fleet and your drivers to improve their levels of compliance, you can actually see some significant benefits. But it's no good as Highways England just talking about what everybody else needs to do. I very often attend meetings where that seems to be the standard policy. We're thinking about what should everybody else do rather than ourselves. And so we were very clear, and we got complete support from our board and from our chief executive, that we need to lead by example. Who are we to tell any business or any other body what to do if we are not doing it ourselves? And so we have followed the model that we've developed with Driving for Better Business. And we've undertaken a full review. We've revised and updated all our driving at work policies. We've signed the commitment, and in January we became a champion for Driving for Better Business in England. One of the things that we have done, and this is going to be crucial to how we're going to drive this across business in the United Kingdom, is we've mandated that businesses who want to contract from us in the future must also be able to demonstrate that they are a legally compliant business. Why would we give them millions of pounds worth of work if they cannot demonstrate that they are actually compliant and legal company? So you see here, the first in green here, this is a quote from our minister, who we report directly to. And it's not just a matter for government, it is about sharing responsibility with business, but again, we have to lead by example. So the Health and Safety Executive that sets the standards for work-related driving, they are now on board and a supporter of this program, as is the Department for Transport, but also the Transport Safety Commission. You can see the quotes here, is that we need to adopt new policies and procedures for road safety management systems that will reduce work-related injuries. So what we did here is we held an event, you can see just in the top corner, on the House of Commons. We launched this, if you like, across the public service on the 22nd of January. And here we had a call requiring that the public sector and the supply chains must be compliant. We cannot continue to allow business to ignore the law. And so here you can see the National Police Chiefs Council, the National Fire Chiefs Council, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners are all on board now supporting this call with ever stretched resources that we're facing in England on how we're going to adopt this. It's important that the police can be more focused and more targeted. So if we can get business to become more compliant, then our enforcement partners can concentrate on targeting those that need to be spoken to or actioned more readily. So you see here, one of the things that came out from this event is no company should win public sector work if operating outside the law. It's very simple. If business comes to us, they want to sell us a new system, they want to sell us chairs, whatever. Until they can demonstrate that they're a legally compliant business, we will look to withhold future contracts and only work with those companies that are taking this seriously. The next event, which will be on the 8th of May as part of Global Road Safety Week, which, as you see there, the theme is leadership. We are inviting 100 to 150 of the top CEOs of business across Britain and explain to them this process. So we will be doing it at the McLaren Innovation Centre, where we will discuss some of the common issues and the challenges and seek the leadership of core business within England, Great Britain, to help us to make this as well understood as health and safety legislation is in the UK. So again, the private sector, we will help to drive this, not just across the road sector, but the Rail Safety Standard Board, the Rail Sector Association of British Ports are all signed up to this programme. So if you're working for one of the big companies, you might have similar contracts with the ports or with the nuclear industry or the rail industry or ourselves, they'll be hearing the same message. You want us to give you a contract, you demonstrate to us that your vehicles are being your fleets are being well maintained or being driven compliantly, and that your drivers understand what are the requirements for what they're doing. So we're basing this around the compliance model. What we want to do is move everybody from the red to the green. Now we appreciate that we can't do that, but what we're saying with our enforcement partners, such as the police, what we're saying is you concentrate on the red. Those people, those businesses, those people, those drivers who have chosen to not comply, rather than the people who are making mistakes. We will use the power that we've got in influencing through campaigns, but also talking to business, and more important, from businesses talking to their own staff of the need to be compliant. So we've developed this model, which is we'll make it easy for people to comply. We will assist them to comply by telling them what they need to do, because very often people make mistakes. That's the whole point about the Safe System approach, is people make mistakes. So we will assist them to comply. It's very difficult if you don't know what the law is to actually adhere to that law, okay? We accept that ignorance of the law is no defense, but the point is we have a duty to tell them what it is that we expect of them. And also we need to deter them. We need to deter them from not doing this by the fact is there is a chance that they might get caught, whether that's through on-road patrols or specific intervention, which I'll talk about in a minute, or by the increasing use of technology that we have developed on our network. And so what we want our enforcement partners to do is to concentrate on that very top bit. They haven't got the time or the resources to be trying to deal with everybody, with the millions of people who are using our network every day. But what we can do is ask them to support us in doing the enforcement element of compliance by concentrating on those who've chosen to ignore everything that we're saying. So what we've done as part of this program, and to prove this concept not only to government but to the police and to our other enforcement partners such as health and safety, the traffic commissioners, etc., is we've run some events. And the shocking thing that we found is business. We only targeted business drivers, particularly trucks, flatbeds carrying a plant or people who were towing. We found on average 85 to 90% non-compliance. So it's not as if we're coming from a low base here and we're trying to actually find. At the moment, the scale of the problem is so great, it does tend to suggest that the reason why businesses are ignoring it is because they do not feel that there is any chance of being detected or engaged with. So I'll give you an example for those of you in the audience. Is anything wrong with this? And I used this at a previous police conference. Actually, there isn't. There's nothing wrong with this. This complies fully with the law of moving material around the roads in England. But actually, when we put a compliance event on together with the police, with driving vehicle standards, with customs who were looking for illegal fuel, that's actually what we found. The picture was one that he sent to his fleet director, asking him to write to us to get him the fine, the £100 fine and the 3 points on his license, because he'd already had previous convictions. He was asking his boss, because this company worked for us, they were one of our supply chain. So he was asking us to try and have a word with the police and the courts and say, waive the offence. But actually, that's what we found. So he knew what his company policy was. He knew that he shouldn't leave a site without making sure the load was secure, but he couldn't be bothered spending an extra 15, 20 minutes at the end of his day to do that. But what this kind of activity has demonstrated for us is the fact is that we can then go back to his company. So it's not just about giving the fine or the ticket or the points to the driver. We need to find out who we work for. Another initiative that we're doing is we're looking at the big users, heavy users of our network, some of the multinational companies that use our network. In one particular case where we'd identified around 80 offences have been committed by their drivers. When we asked to meet them and explain to them that this was a growing concern, they had 71,000 drivers working for that company. So this kind of initiative enables us to actually engage with tens of thousands of people to bring about behavioural change. But the behavioural change comes from the company by reviewing, revising their policies and telling them not only is it against the law, it's against company policy and we will not tolerate it. So it's a very much a multi-partnership, multi-ownership approach that we're trying to do and change the way that we do the traditional campaigns of make sure your load's secured or don't drive fast. If your boss tells you not to do something and he will be monitoring how you do it and you will face penalties when you get back to the office, that's far better in many cases than a policeman who stops you and you think you've been very unlucky to actually have got stopped. So the compliance checks, as we see here, we're identifying stolen loads through this. We're working, but in some cases, like particularly up in Hull, on the approach to the port of Hull, what we found here was that in many cases we had 100% non-compliance. On this bottom one, not only was 100% non-compliance, but they were finding 2 offences per vehicle. So the vehicles are seized. In this particular case, stolen plant was recovered. So by doing these on-road activities, not only does it enable us to actually have the evidence and actually do physical interventions on the day, but it's helping us to identify the businesses where this is not being adhered to. So basically, everyone who is driving for work should comply with the current law and with health and safety legislation. And I believe that Driving for Better Business is an enabler to easy steps to improve compliance. So hopefully what we've introduced you today is a different approach to the traditional campaigning or patrols, but hopefully this is starting to become good practice across England, working with many partners to actually engage with business and say, you need to get your act in order, but if you don't, then there will be consequences to not only your drivers, but your business as well in the long run. So thank you very much.
شكرا للسيد ستيوارت. قائد فريق السلام الاستراتيجية للطرق السريعة من المملكة المتحدة، حيث استعرض عن مفهوم وتطوير القيادة على الطرق والبرنامج الذي يعمل عليه Driving for Better Businesses, Not Business as Usual. Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
كل الشكر والتقدير لمدير الجلسة وكذلك المتحدثين في هذه الجلسة المثرية. الآن ندعو سعادة اللواء مهندس مستشار محمد سيف الزفين مساعد القائد العام لشؤون العمليات لتكريم المتحدثين في هذه الجلسة.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to award our speakers.
الدكتور نيكول سكالا.
دكتور نيكول سكالا.
العقيد باولو سيسترا من الشرطة الوطنية الإيطالية.
كولونيل باولو سيسترا.
الدكتورة جو بارنز من جامعة ليفبرا.
دكتور جو بارنز.
البروفيسور ديتمار أوتيه من معهد هانوفر للأدلة في ألمانيا.
بروفيسور ديتمار أوتيه.
ستوارت لوفات.
ستوارت لوفات.
وأخيراً تكريم رئيس الجلسة مهندس خبير الملازم أحمد عباس معروف من الإدارة العامة للمرور. على هذه الجلسة المثرية. الحضور الكريم الآن ندعوكم لاستراحة قصيرة لين الساعة 10 بإذن الله، ومن ثم سوف نواصل بقية مواضيعنا مع المتحدثين.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a short break till 10 sharp. Please make sure that we meet at the network area to exchange knowledge, and kindly visit Dubai Police Symposium to rate our speakers. Thank you very much.